Alrighty, so today we're going to talk about Charlotte FC in the season preview. So obviously, for Charlotte FC, there is no doubt that heading into the season, they have one goal in mind, and that, of course, is finally get out of the first round. These last couple of years, it's great the fact that they finally able to make it to the playoffs, and they kind of been improving ever since the expansion season. I mean, when you look at their last four seasons, their points total has pretty much increased every year, and some might say that it can happen again this year as well. But obviously the credit for first round is something that it's been kind of on their mind, and that yeah, we'll see whether or not if this team will have enough. And when you look at this roster, I've always said that this team kind of have a very dark horse kind of roster. Not many people talk about how this short roster is actually pretty well built, and especially you have Dean Smith, who is one of the more underrated head coach in this league. This might be a team that maybe can finally get out of the first round heading into this season. Now, last season they finished with a 19-2-13 record and finished with 59 points, but they were once again eliminated in the first round, this time to NYCFC. Their last MLS playoff appearance was 2025, and they have yet to win their first ever MLS Cup. I mean, this is only their fifth season in MLS, so I don't expect them to win an MLS Cup that soon, unless of course you're Atlanta United or Inter Miami, who have done it within their first 5 years, and even LAFC as well. Now, looking at last season, like I said, they finished with a 19-2-13 record, finished with 59 points, and were eliminated by NYCFC in the first round. The previous season, they finished 14-9-11, 51 points, eliminated by Orlando City in the first round. And yeah, that was a game that I think Charlotte fans would not want to talk about, at least in that first round, especially in game number three, where they were literally stoppage time minutes away from moving on into the second round. And then in 2023, they finished with a 10-13-11 record, finished with 43 points. They made it to the playoffs for the very first time in franchise history, but they got absolutely demolished by the New York Red Bulls in that play in round. And then in 2022, in their expansion season, they finished 13-3-18 with 42 points. It was actually a pretty respectable record. And just like what I said about Austin, their expansion season was pretty respectful, and it's another example of what I said before, where as much as I know these last two expansion team has really kind of pushed the envelope when it comes to what an expansion season looks like. People need to remember that an expansion season is not always going to look like San Diego or St. Louis, of them finishing in first in the Western Conference. You're going to have times where expansion team maybe struggle a bit, and Charlotte definitely had their struggle in their expansion season, but it kind of got better, and they almost made it to the playoffs. They were in the playoff hunt for a while in their expansion season, but unfortunately unable to to get into it in their expansion season. Now, look at some of the signings that they made this off season. So they got Luca De La Torre, who of course is the biggest signing you got to say that Charlotte of course got. I really like this signing. I mean, Luca De La Torre, he was very good during his time with San Diego. It's kind of unfortunate that he kind of dropped down the pecking order, because that San Diego team is already pretty stacked from top to bottom, and you just kind of had a sense that with the quality that he brings, he's too good to just sit on the bench with San Diego FC. It looked like he wants to go somewhere else, and now going to Charlotte, a team that I'm pretty sure he's going to be a starter for this team, no doubt. So yeah, I think this is a huge signing for the Charlotte team to boost her already a very good midfield that this team has. They also brought in some depth in the center back position. They got Henry Kessler and David Schlegel. Now, obviously, center back is definitely one area that they were looking for, especially with the loss of Malanda this offseason. They need to maybe find a replacement. Though I don't think Kessler and Schleg is definitely those replacement. And as I'll talk about in just a bit, they really still haven't yet to find that high end center back in terms of the replacement for Malanda in that spot. And then of course they bought Tyler Miller in the offseason as well. Obviously he's going to be a backup goalkeeper because Drake Callender went to Minnesota United. Speaking of Drake Callender, that was one of the first players that is no longer on this team, followed by Bill Tuoluma, Nick Sirkadeni, Brendan Cambridge, though I have heard that they're still talking to him when it comes to getting a contract extension, so we'll see whether or not if that will complete. Johanny Forbes, Nikola Pekovic, who of course is now on loan with the Seattle Sounders, and we'll see whether or not if he is going to be come back after his loan is expired, or the Sounders maybe buy him outright. Which for the Sounders, it is pretty clear that I know when they bought Pekovic, that was kind of the replacement for Vargas, I didn't expect it was going to be straight away in the beginning of the season, especially with Vargas recently announced his departure from the Seattle Sounders and going to play his his boyhood club that he support in Atletico Madrid. So yeah, Pekovic is definitely going to get more minutes, and that was kind of the problem with him with Charlotte FC, where he didn't really get too much minutes, even though he has a lot of upside. And then they also let go of Eric Williamson. What a huge fall from grace for Eric Williamson. A couple of years when he was really touted highly and even was touted to be with the U.S. men's national team. If there is an example of a player that has his upside completely destroyed and took a huge fall from grace because of injury, Eric Wilson is definitely a great example of the injuries has really set him back to a point where he's still on the free agency market as we speak. And the same goes for Bingham as well. I almost said David Beckham there for a reason. David Beckham no longer plays in this league. He's now part of the ownership of Inter Miami and done a pretty good job in terms of it. But David Bingham no longer on this team, and then of course they transfer Allison Miranda this season to Middlesbrough. He was actually still on kind of a loan to finish the season, but now he is permanently transferred to Middlesbrough. And then of course they decided to not renew the loan of Jaquil Marshall-Rutty as he's now back with CF Montreal. Now looking at the last 5 game of the season, or actually let's take a look at the first 5 game of the season, shall we? So they start on the road against St. Louis before going on the road to play against the Galaxy, and then they return home to play against Austin FC. They have that big showdown against Inter Miami. Something tells me it's going to be 70,000 plus at the bank in that game as well. And then they have the New York Red Bulls as part of the first 5 games that they have. Now, looking at the last 5 games, they go on the road to face against the Philadelphia Union before going on the road to play against the Portland Timbers. They return home to play against Montreal before returning home to play against Orlando City. And then for their decision day game, they have one of the toughest decision day game, if not the toughest decision day game that any team has to face. And that, of course, is going down to Freedom Park to play against Inter Miami. And there's no doubt that when you look at the last 5 games, it is a brutal schedule for Charlotte FC. I mean, besides Montreal, all these teams that they're playing are relatively good team, and they're hoping that they'll probably wrap up their playoff chances by then and not have to worry about their last 5 games. But as I always say, when teams have a tough stretch to finish the season, it's actually could be a blessing in disguise when a team is doing well, and that is you get a chance to test against some of the best team that you might face in the playoffs. And when you look at these last 5 games, I mean, besides the Portland Timbers, that is, and even Montreal as well. I don't think Montreal is going to make the playoffs this year. All the other opponent that they might face in the last 5 games, besides Montreal and Portland, could be a matchup they might face in the playoffs in the future as well, especially in the first round as well. So look at the strength of this team. It's got to be the midfield. So the midfield, was already pretty good. It's just got a lot better now that with Luca De La Torre, they're joining the team. The weakness, I think it's going to be the center back partnership and maybe the goalkeeping. And let me explain why, because I know some Charlotte fans might think I'm crazy by putting center back partnership in their defense as one of their weakness. Consider this team has always been pretty good on the defensive end, and also Kalina has always been a pretty good goalkeeper. But let me explain why I might not think that is the case and label it as a weakness. So the center back partnership, the reason why I labeled this as a weakness is the loss of Malanda is huge for this team. I think his partnership with Ream was pretty good last season. Now you you bring back Andrew Privet back into that role. Privet had a really rough season last year, and especially his profile might not really quite work the same way with Tim Ream as well. Now you have a problem in terms of your center back and your defense maybe took a huge downgrade because of that. And then the goalkeeping spot as well. Again, I know some people think I'm crazy by saying Kalina is one of the weakness, consider he had a pretty good season, especially in the second half of last year. But let's also not forget what happened in the first half of the season as well. He's been kind of inconsistent at least last year and also in his first season as well. He had a very good second season, and I believe that was the year he won the goalkeeper of the year as well. So if they can get a consistent Christian Kalina, maybe that might not be a weakness, and maybe I'm kind of reaching a little bit, but it's all about the consistency. Can they get some consistency for Kalina, and especially can they also find out one of the big questions that they need this offseason, and then of course is bringing a high end center back. So as much as obviously there I will also say that this big question with this team with the fact that will they really trust Privet will be the guy to have a bounce back season after last year he had a rough year. People forget that when Privet came into this Charlotte team just a couple years ago, he was very good for this team. He was definitely touted as one of the young feet of this team, but as you saw last season, he had a rough last season. Really lost his spot as a resort, and now him being thrust back in. Do you trust the fact that it will work well? Especially as I said, what I heard in terms of the way Privet uh does as kind of a bit of an fashioned center back and kind of a guy that maybe be playing more like a hybrid defensive mid role. Does that really work well with Reem in terms of the same dynamism that Reem shown his partnership with Alisson Melenda. And if that's not the case, they need to bring in a high end center back as well. And one way they can get a high end center back is get rid of one of their DP spot to maybe open one up and even open a U22 spot. I don't think they necessarily need to have a DP in terms of getting a center back. Obviously, I've always said before in this league, it's almost a cardinal sin to sign one of your center back as a designated player, unless of course he is deemed as among the top five or even the top three center back in this league. Because if he's not a top three or top five center back in this league, wasting a DP spot on a center back, it's just an ultimate cardinal sin when it comes to building your roster within an MLS team. But yeah, they don't necessarily need to have a DP spot. They might actually go with a U22 initiative spot as well. Might go with a two DP and four U22 kind of option. But in order for that to happen, they need to get rid of Leo Obata. Leo Obata contract, it's been a huge albatross for this team. It is pretty clear that they need to move on from him. He is a guy that just does not fit in this team, and they've been trying to do so for a while now. There was rumor that a couple of championship side was interested in terms of getting him, but nevertheless, they'll definitely want to find a way to get rid of that contract because it really maybe is kind of holding back not only the potential of them signing another good U22 or even a DP kind of type of player, but also address the biggest need that they have with the way that they haven't really quite find the perfect replacement for Melanda they lost this off season. And then last but not least, do they have enough to finally get out of the first round? So obviously, when you look at this team, besides the question on the defensive end, the rest of the team is pretty good. I mean, I mentioned the midfield, very good, very solid. With Ashley Westwood being the leader that he is and a no nonsense kind of defensive mid, and you of course bring Luca Della Torre, who's probably going to be a regular starter for this team. I think he's a huge upgrade compared to Diani last season. And then you assume that maybe Wilfred Zaha will have his loan extended if he has another good season. And then of course the most important thing with this team that they really missed last season, Pep Biel. They're gonna get a healthy Pep Biel back this season. He was a huge difference for this team, and I'm not saying that he would absolutely necessarily mean that Charlotte would have beat NYCFC in the first round if he was there, but it would have definitely helped their cause, especially the playmaking and the goal scoring that he brings to the table. And they also hope that Togomati will have another good season as well, another Patrick Ajiman kind of level of season. Although, if he is going to have another good season, do not be surprised. There's going to be a lot of offer in the summer transfer window for him as well. There's already some offer for him in Europe, and I wouldn't be surprised there might be more. But if you add all that to the factor, is it enough to finally get them out of the first round? They do finish pretty well in the regular season. They do have a chance maybe face against a lesser team in the East. Though, as I said before, the East, just like the last couple of seasons, it's going to be a bloodbath. There's a lot of good team in the East. It's not easy to win a round or two, but for Charlotte, it just feels like that's kind of almost the expectation for this team. They cannot get stuck in this first round purgatory that they've been stuck in the last couple of years, because if that's the case, this is where I've said this before with other teams that feels like they're kind of spinning the tire and stuck in this hamster wheel of being in this purgatory of spot of good enough to make it to the playoff, but not good enough to compete, or not good enough to get over the hump and win the ultimate prize in MLS Cup. That's when you're started thinking whether or not if this roster might need to have a huge jolt of changes to get themselves over the hump. Now, the prediction that I have in this team, this might be very generous that I put them in second place in terms of being their ceiling. I mean, on paper, this team could definitely get up to that spot. Again, every single season, it looks like they improve. Though it is the case, then I think they're definitely going to get 60 plus points, which could be good enough in terms of getting into those top three spot. But again, it all depends on if everything goes right with this team, especially if they can figure out the problem that they have on the defensive front. The low, of course, is going to be in eighth place. I put them there mainly because they'll still be a team that I think will be good enough to make it to the playoffs. If there's one thing I've said about the East in the past couple of years, and it might be the same case again heading into this season, there feels like there's a huge disconnect between the teams that is above the red line last season to the team that's below the red line. In other words, there's always this halves or have-nots in the East, where there's always the halves in terms of being some of the better team in the East and always compete in that bloodbath in the playoffs. But then there's also the have-nots, as we've seen last season, where some of the team that did not make it to a playoffs, especially near the bottom of the standing, they were not only among the worst team in the East, but they were among the worst team in the league in general as well. So yeah, I think because of that, I don't think they're going to drop out of the playoff spot. I'll be shocked if they of course would do so. I think this is a team that is going to be good enough to make it to the playoffs. But again, the big question is, are they good enough to finally win a first round matchup and win a playoff series for the first time in franchise history? But there we have it. That is pretty much it. Looking at Charlotte FC in the season preview. As always, let me know in the comments below what do you think of this video. And if you're a Charlotte fan, what do you think is the strength, the weakness, the free big question, and your prediction of how this team is going to look heading into this upcoming season. But until then, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time.